Hi all, my name is Anastasia and I'm a team lead and a Salesforce tech lead in Ceneba. Having been working with Salesforce technology for more than 5 years and been experienced in different sectors like healthcare products, services to patients, telecommunication, payments and service provider. I have already passed Dev 1 and Dev 2 certification and I'm continuing my path to architect and already passed platform app builder and development and deployment lifecycle certificates. I really enjoy my work with Salesforce technology because it never stays in one place and you never stop learning. Today we're going to talk about Visualforce, Aura, LWC, and why you need to know all three. And today we will discuss and compare LWC, Visualforce, and Aura framework. We will discuss use cases and why all three are required to know, and why switching to Lighting is really important to all customers which are using Salesforce. Let's start with discussing Visualforce. A lot of people who come to Salesforce in 2021 and start parsing front-end development think that they just need to learn LWC technology and that will be enough to become a professional. And often Visualforce is considered as almost extinct dinosaur. But honestly, this is not true. Certainly, all of us should reconcile ourselves to the fact that one person cannot learn all aspects of Salesforce because it's really huge and giant platform with different add-ons, packages, and releases 3 times a year. However, learning the basics is necessary in order to quality improve knowledge when new updates came out. Visualforce is still the easiest way to build PDF documents if you have simple template. It also allows you to build a custom, beautiful UI experiences and custom email templates with additional data to be displayed. Also, it is a good base and container for public sites, and also a base for third-party applications with complicated JavaScript experience. And also, if you're not a beginner in Salesforce, you know that we have a lot of huge projects which are using Salesforce for more than 7 years, and usually such projects have really complicated classic experience with a lot of Visualforce and other legacy code. So you should be capable to support them and to be able to figure out their path moving to Lighting. So you will need to understand what should be migrated to Lighting first as critical item and what can be left in Visualforce as is, and that will be enough. So let's continue talk about Visualforce and let's not consider it as dinosaur. Visualforce is a Salesforce platform framework. According to Salesforce definition, it is a framework that allows developers to build applications, custom user interface that can be hosted natively on the Lighting platform. The Visualforce includes tag-based language, which is similar to HTML, and have a set of server-side standard controllers that makes basic database operations, such as queries and save, very simple to perform. A page can be accessed using URL, similar of the traditional web server page. With Visualforce, you can do lots of things. Some of them I have already mentioned before. So you can build public sites which will be accessible by external users. You can build custom PDF documents. You can have email templates with complicated data retrieved with custom controller. You can embed your custom component in page layout of your record. You can define also custom tab, which will work with some custom navigation and experience. As well, you can also override behavior of standard buttons. You can create your custom new or custom view experience. And also, usually it's used like a container for third-party applications. And as well, with Visualforce, you can use it to run screen flows, which admin will develop. Let's discuss a bit how Visualforce UI generation works. So basically, Visualforce is also closely connected to Apex controller because most of things are executed on server side. The user requests page from a server. The server executes page underlying code and gives the browser the resulting HTML. When the user interacts with page somehow, the browser displays HTML and then returns to step 1. So basically, let's discuss some advantages of Visualforce. Basically, it's tried and true model because it's used in Salesforce for years, so it's stable and works properly. It does not have two-way binding, so you will have to wait until the whole page has been updated from the server. It also benefits for the performance. It's easy to implement for greater productivity. It's also connected with advantage above. Huge applications can be divided into smaller, more manageable pages. So basically, Visualforce page can be divided in some components, and it will be easier to manage. And one more advantage is that Visualforce has metadata integration built in. So it has lots of out-of-the-box things, metadata integration, standard controllers functionality. So lots of things you can do out of the box without writing many of custom Apex code. Regarding disadvantages, interactivity is limited and UI is quite old to our days. Only in case if custom JavaScript external library is added, we have more interactive experience for user and increased latency. Let's also discuss some best practices for the Visualforce pages. But those best practices which I will mention will be also good to consider for LWC and Visualforce and our components, because those best practices are common for each front-end technology in Salesforce. So when you design your Visualforce page, and here you should notice that when you design basically our LWC, no matter what you are designing, you need to follow the following best practice guidelines. You need to define a page around specific task, a sensible workflow, and navigation between tasks. So you should have some kind of purpose for your Visualforce page and specific workflow. Do not overload your page with functionality, because if you will add too much functionality, you will have too long Visualforce page, which will be hard to support and complicated to maintain later. And it will also increase cost of future system maintenance. Push back on requests if functionality is unnecessary and if it will overcomplicate. Build prototype to validate concerns. All of those things you should consider for other components as well, because you should have proper workflow described and you should follow it to avoid overload of the page. Next best practices for Visualforce are the following. Use standard objects and declarative features. Whenever you can use something standard, you should use it, because declarative and standard out-of-the-box things in Salesforce are more stable because they are tested for a longer time than any custom solution. Always try to limit amount of data which you are displaying on Visualforce, because more data you want to display, it will have impact on performance. Delay expensive calculations or data loading, if it's possible in your case. Offload processing to asynchronous tasks. Cache global data in custom setting. And be careful with writing APACs and SOQL queries, because it will have impact on amount of data which you will display on Visualforce. When you are writing your SOQL, you should always add proper described where condition with detailed criteria to retrieve only data that you exactly need. And keep in mind that it's always better to add criteria on indexed fields, because in case if your environment have a large amount of data, your SOQL query can be considered as non-selectable. Always, when you are working with Visualforce, try to optimize your view state, minimize your CSS and JavaScript files, and be careful with image usage, because it also have impact on time to load the page. So basically, we have covered bigger part for Visualforce, and now we will move to next stage of Salesforce. It's our components. Basically, in 2014, Salesforce launched the Lighting Component Framework, and it's changed Salesforce front-end programming way forever. Lighting Component Framework brought a component-driven model which was built, which is basically brilliant to develop large-scale enterprise applications. Our components are self-contained and reusable units of application. They represent reusable section of UI and can be changed from a single line of text to entire application. The framework includes a set of pre-built components, which you can use just out of the box, just customize a few attributes, and you have your own component with already predefined, pretty standard functionality. Also, you can assemble and configure components to form new components in application. Components are rendered to produce HTML DOM elements within the browser. A component can contain other components as well as more HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or any web-enabled code. Everything that happens inside a component is encapsulated, and hence the developer can just concentrate on building their application. Innovation, design changes, or any change done in component is done by author only. So it's easy to split work between a few developers when one component contains a few inside, so each developer can be focused on own component and do not contradict with another one. Also, you can configure components by using name attributes, and component interact with environment by listening or publishing events. As we have different kind of events in our framework, and it's pretty easy to use them. Let's discuss how lighting UI generation works in a different to Visualforce. So lighting UI generation, it's more client-side. So when user requests an application or component, this referred to as client-side. The client receives the framework or component kit. The bundle is loaded by the browser. When the user interacts with website, clicking on the button or interact with some forms, the JavaScript application generates the user interface, which it then modifies as appropriate and then returns to previous step. Basically, let's right now discuss some advantages, and then I will highlight a few disadvantages for our framework. So, major benefits of using our components. Lighting component framework is not backed with legacy Visualforce framework, so it's not so heavy. And it allows to develop and create applications using standardized JavaScript framework. Components are simple to use, simple to reuse, which offers a robust and fast framework to work with. Lighting framework is very much event-driven, which helps deliver faster applications to end users. So you have different kind of events, as I mentioned before. You can use component events to communicate between your child and parent components, and you can use your application event to communicate with different components which are located, for example, on your record page or your home page. Lighting component pages have higher performance, and it has less legacy parts, and it's easy to create responsive page or applications using this framework. Also, we should consider that application user interface is higher interactive other than Visualforce. Our component have two-way binding, which display content on the UI after each of them has been updated. To achieve positive results, Lighting Salesforce initiative make use of Salesforce user interface strategy. Also, with this framework, we started less think regarding how to build UI, because we have lighting design system which have lots of predefined standard component UI, so developer can be focused on functionality more than on UI. Because when we had Visualforce only, we had the ability to use different custom CSS libraries, and we had no unique and we had no good experience, because different styles usually confuse user. Let's discuss our use cases and where we can use it. Aura, as well as Visualforce, have lots of places and use cases which we can use. For example, you can place your custom component on record page or home page of in Lighting Application Builder. You can also build your custom component and place it some kind of quick action in utility items. You can have a quick action which will be global or related to particular record. You can define custom tab, and you can override a standard button. As well, you can also use it to develop pre-chat component, and you can also build your own community theme. because with Visualforce and with LWC you cannot build your custom community theme. And also let's discuss some Aura conventions and recommendations. Basically, when you work with Aura, it's recommended to create your base component with some basic methods and make sure that each next component that you or your team will create will extend it. This will help you to maintain code in future. This will increase your development productivity because you will need to write less code, and it will be better for component maintenance because you will have base component where you can update or fix something, and it will be fixed in all components where it is used. Because with our components we can extend and inherit some helper methods. Also, I highly do recommend to group attributes, handlers, events, and methods to the top and add comments to each of them. So you will not spend long time by scrolling up and down to find out name of your attribute. You will have all your attributes at the beginning at the top. Do not underestimate code style. Code should be readable and it should be easy to maintain. Always remember about this. Also, let's discuss some shortcomings with traditional Aura. Continuous UI transformations needed optimize and rendering, which is not the case with lighting components. Also, standard UI cannot be altered to create customized components, which basically is the biggest shortcoming, because the modern enterprise would like to consider customized user experience to their own needs. So those shortcomings Salesforce considered, and then basically new technology came out, because our framework is great framework where we have view model controller, so it's easy to work separately on backend functionality, on client-side controller JavaScript, and it's easy to extend it. Because also for best practices you need to remember that your controller do not have these contexts, and in case if you need to reuse some methods, you should place it in helper. And this framework is great, but even the best possible solution is thought of when a development framework like designed, but within the time every best solution gets room for improvement. So lighting web components is the new way to create components in Salesforce simply. In 2014, since Aura was introduced, Internet was changed. Google started to scrap decades-old limitations and introduced new concept of web components. After Google has released web components for Chrome browser, other browsers like Safari, Edge, Firefox started to adopt it faster. And Salesforce development had to keep up the pace and standardization of the web components according to the huge demand of the web components across the internet. Salesforce moved from lighting component to lighting web components framework and kept all good aspects of famous Aura. Lighting web components leverage the web components technology and DOM rendering and deliver unparalleled user experience through pages. Benefits of lighting web components over our lovely Aura is that they have combined web component programming with Salesforce metadata and services. It allowed them to leverage unprecedented productivity. Here are some benefits of using web components. So they can also coexist. It's also a benefit because it's easier to move from our technology to lighting web components. There is more customization with LWC than that of our component. Use of reusable services. LWC components are customizable, reusable, and scalable. And those components can be even without any UI. Those service components can be used anywhere in the application. It helps to keep your code organized and clean. Enhanced security and browser capability LWC have built in is security features. Also, it has limited event scope and more CSS, JavaScript, and DOM isolation, and this offers better security and better browser capability for application. Basically, LWC, the first thing that you should know about web components is that it contains 4 separate technologies. It contains custom elements, the HTML with custom template, tag names like behavior made set of JavaScript APIs, shadow DOM. We use it for isolation, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML templates, user-defined templates in HTML, and ES model. ES model specification defined the including and reuse of JavaScript documents in a standard-based, modular, performant way. Also, let's talk about advantages of LWC, and then we will talk about some limitations. Basically, it's pretty easy to learn LWC in case if you know Aura. Honestly, we need to consider that LWC is more complex framework and it's bigger front-end technology. It's still native web standard, so it's pretty easy to learn. It's better performance because no edit abstraction layer. LWC is likely to render faster than our components since performance is important to delivery. And also performance is improved because by default LWC do not have two-way binding. Also we have faster loading sites, we have more standards. LWC has built-in browser security features from web component standards, so usage out of the box is more and less of customization. And we know usually when less customization, it works faster, it works more native. In case if you have less custom things. Also common components, service components. We can now write components that have no user interface in LWC, and those components can be reused in other components which are more efficient than static resources. Because with static resources we were more limited. Yes, we have ability to work with archives, but still it's not so native to use as right now we can do with LWC. It's easier to ramp for developers because developers don't need to learn additional framework in order to develop. So a transition for developers is a lot faster. Better security, better testing, better browser capability. With LWC, CSS, script, and DOM isolation are better and has more limited event scope. With each of those, we have more consistently in design system. LWC also support two-way data binding, but it's not enabled by default, so we should be always careful with it. And basically, regarding where we can use LWC as well as our components, we have lots of places where we can use them. We can use them on home and record pages. We can have a custom tab. You can authorize standard button. You can also build a component which will be used in community and will have high performance. Things which you should remember about LWC where you can't use it is that you can't create a quick action in community for now. It's not enabled yet. And also you can't create custom community theme. For this you should use our component. And also one of limitations for now, but Salesforce is on the way to resolve it, is that LWC do not support custom namespace. That's why it's complicated to include it, to include component in managed package and share it, because only standard namespace is accessible. And let's talk about some convention and recommendation for LWC. My recommendation will be to create a separate label JavaScript file in the component folder to avoid a bigger part in your component for just labels. Because each of your component, if you are doing multi-language component, according to best practice, you will have lots of custom labels. So recommendation is to create custom label JavaScript and to import it then in your component. When you are writing LWC, you should separate view-related functionality from other kind of processes, and you should be focused on your workflow. Components can be delegated to certain tasks to services, such as fetching data from service, validating user input, or logging directly to console. By defining such processing tasks in a server, you make those tasks available to any component. Also, recommendation is to create reusable components. Define required reusable components for your system and improve your development process by this. Some samples of custom reusable components which you can configure on LWC. It's global service, which will contain different utility items, toast service, navigation service, execute, flow, model, because every system have model windows. And in case if you will have one server place where you will have defined proper methods to display model window, every developer who will work on quick action, on custom action for user, they will have the same experience and it will be really easy to maintain such code. And let's right now start talking about lighting migration and why it is so scary for customers. And why, even if it is scary, customers will have to do it. Salesforce position lighting as a future of cloud CRM as new and easy way to manage and close deals much quicker using dynamic views, mobile-ready UI, customizable home pages, and lots of other things. New public presentations are used in lighting. Release notes of platform updates contain merely lighting improvements. So new users are assured that there is no time to wait because no classic in current presentations of Salesforce. In January 2020, Salesforce officially enabled new lighting experience for all customers. And they are not retiring Salesforce Classic yet. The CRM giant is only releasing new features for lighting. And if company is still using Salesforce Classic, this means only one thing, that this company should think about the strategy, how to move, how to migrate from Classic to Lighting. Because when Salesforce Lighting was launched in October 2015, performance issues, general discomfort, some development limitations, lots of those things stopped customers to migrate to Lighting when it was launched. And even when I have started working with Lighting and tried to develop my first component in 2016, it was really painful, because when you did some mistake, instead of user-friendly stack trace and some lines of code methods where you did something wrong, you just got a message, sorry for interrupt, and you had to dig and to figure out where you did something wrong. Was it on client side, or was it something wrong in your backend code? But right now, Salesforce has addressed the vast majority of those performance concerns. But even with this consideration that majority of those issues is resolved, Lighting migration and Lighting adoption is still so far from universal. Companies that are using Salesforce for a long time usually have really complex Classic configuration, that they have too many on-click JavaScript buttons. They have lots of Visualforce pages which are used to override experience, and lots of Visualforce which is embedded in record pages and in page layouts. So why switching to Lighting is really important for all customers? Let's consider that and be honest that Classic will be not supported forever. We need to understand it, and new features are available only to Lighting. Also, Classic support and maintain is more expensive than Lighting, because development right now on LWC and on our framework is much faster than working with Visualforce if we are talking about some components for record pages, because we have App Builder which allow us to use also a standard out-of-the-box components and change UI really easy. And also we have lots of optimizations in user experience, because UI UX is much better in Lighting. We have new Salesforce Einstein functions, we have instant search, activity timeline, Kanban view, path, and we have also enhanced reports. Salesforce has modern interface that allow to user to do lots of things on one screen without switching between them. For example, using Kanban, users can quickly create, assign, and move tasks without moving to any other view. So basically, the really longer Lighting experience is out, the bigger difference between Classic will be. And it will be harder and harder to move to Lighting view. So let's discuss some best practices for migration, because it's always scary to customer, but with an appropriate plan, with considering some best practices, it will be more easy to move to Lighting. Because for big organizations, it will take maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months, but still strategy needs to be built, because again, Classic will be not supported forever. Best practices for migration. Firstly, it's good to enable Lighting for admins, so they will be able to test them first. Also, make sure to evaluate and check your AppExchange applications that are installed in your system, that they are lighting ready. Identify a group of beta users who will test application. Create chatter group where users will be able to discuss questions, issues, brainstorm new features. Create a beta application where users will be able to play with it before you will move this functionality to your active org. And do not disable Classic for users at the beginning. Let them switch back and forth for a while to get used to system. Also, we can review 5 phases to successfully migrate to lighting. It's discovery, plan and align, prepare and implement, train and launch, measure and optimize. Let's quickly go through all of them. Firstly, you need to discover, is your system lighting ready or not? You can use experience readiness check to see if existing features customizations need any attention. And pay attention to your packages, analyze your on-click JavaScript buttons, script and URL buttons, because in some cases you will need to adapt it for lighting. Phase 2, plan and align. Identify executive sponsors who will drive the process and key stakeholders to gather requirements, as it's really important firstly to gather requirements, then to start on implementation. Choose a rollout strategy. Identify measure of success to be able to understand that you reached the point of success. Develop a change management plan. Then you should move to prepare and implement phase. During the Salesforce lighting rollout, you will need to identify a pilot group of your users who will test Salesforce application and provide feedback. Here, ideally, you should have super users, at least 1-2 users from your main group for each functional group, and they will become lighting advocates. Train your team. Use Trailhead and in-person trainings. Train and launch. So you will have already prepared training and you will need to train users and give access to pilot users, and when you're ready, activate your lighting. Then measure, optimize and adjust. It will be an ongoing process that you will need to monitor. Using the lighting usage application, you can track Salesforce experience adoption metrics, so you can make informed decisions and improve your Salesforce implementation. You can run Salesforce Optimizer and see how your company uses Salesforce features. So you can build your roadmap to improve features. No secret that people don't like changes, and it will take time to improve and train your team. So you will need to find the best time to train them. And it will be not so easy at the beginning, but this is something that every company should do. And if company do not have started those steps, at least in new implementations, developers should consider the following. Stop creating on-click JavaScript buttons and limit Visualforce pages which are embedded in layouts, because those things which will be harder to move to lighting. And start lighting check. Use lighting readiness check and use lighting experience transition tool and learning map to start building your path to migrate to lighting. Because earlier you start, easier will be to migrate. Basically, that's the main part of today's topic.